thank you all for joining us this week for another episode of Flyover Live, a weekly podcast talking about the latest entertainment and political news from the eyes of three Midwestern millennials. I'm your host, Cliff Dennis, and I'm joined here by Brent Pierce to my left.
Cheers.
And producer Mark Berry.
Hey, everyone.
So, Brent, anything last weekend you do? Fun?
I'm still drawing a blank. I did go watch some Premier League soccer Sunday morning.
Oh, nice.
With some friends at Chatham Tap.
I was going to say Chatham, probably a good spot.
Yeah, good spot. And that's really about it. Nothing too crazy and exciting.
Yeah. Mark, anything?
No.
Mark, I know that's a lie. You try to get away with this every time. You went to a friend's lake house last weekend, didn't you not?
No.
You go to a lake house and you can't talk about it?
No. I guess what happens at the lake house stays
It's
at
a
the lake
secret
house.
Oh, it's
layer
the Vegas
of
lake
house,
houses?
yeah.
Oh, I won't pry
I
that.
signed NDAs and everything.
No. Well, would you mind to explain to the folks what an NDA is?
Non-disclosure, I can't talk about it.
Okay.
Now, that's what happens when you've got three lawyers hosting a show is you get acronyms for legal terms.
It's true.
I'm suddenly nervous.
Well, I was going to say about the lake house thing is that I don't know about you guys when you grew up, but like my family was middle class, didn't have some lake house to go off to, so all the kids in my school would always say we went to the lake last weekend. And I always thought I was missing out on something. I'm like in 5th grade, like, wait, where's the lake at that everybody's going to? Like where all the fun times
I'm not
are
one of
happening.
the cool kids, one of the lake kids.
It
We
took
used to
me a
do
while
the
to
whole
figure
Lake Monroe thing growing up. We
Yeah.
used to have a pontoon boat, and we would take her down there and
Nice.
Go for a spin, do some fishing, some primitive camping.
That explains,
it's gorgeous down there.
Explains a lot
Doesn't
about
it?
you, really.
Mhm.
It
I
does.
We'll
wish
talk
I
about
could-
this off air.
I wish I could add to this lake conversation, but I have no idea what you're talking about.
Mark, so
Let's just talk
secretive.
about pontoons for an hour.
Yeah.
Well,
The
everyone,
party
our host today, you can hear his voice, is Chairman Joel Miller, Marion County Democratic Party. Thank you very much for joining us,
Thanks for having
Mr. Chairman.
Welcome, Joel.
me. That
Thanks a
still
lot for being
feels
here.
awkward, people calling me that, but thank you.
I always address you as chairman. Does that make you feel a little uncomfortable, or you probably like that?
No, that's
just from
fine when
me?
you do it, yes.
Okay. Yeah. You always make fun of my hair.
I don't make fun of your hair. I admire your hair. I admire
Brent
your
does
hair.
have some excellent hair.
He has excellent hair.
The camera does pick it up pretty well
I
too.
don't-
So I try to get the
first thing he
part
checked.
mostly
Yeah.
on camera.
For a reminder to the kids listening on iTunes, we do have this up on YouTube as well for you to
Right,
watch.
where you can
So
check out.
You can check out
my
Brent's amazing
glorious
hair.
hair. I'm kind of due for a cut, but
I'm not sure we can ever get you elected to anything, but I know I can get your hair
but the
elected.
hair, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
I told you I was going to start the fade pack. Right?
I'm in. I told you, it's wonderful.
Well, a little bit about Joel. He took over the reins for the Marion County Democratic Party in March of 2013. Is that when that went down?
That's right, yes.
And funny enough, unless my research capabilities are terrible, I was not able to find anything else out about you. Where did you grow up?
Speaking of top secret,
It's successful then.
Right.
My plan is working. No, I grew up in East Central Indiana, a small
Okay.
town called Union City, Indiana.
Union City, East Central.
Yeah, near
So
near
between here
Richmond.
and okay, Richmond. Yeah.
The town is split in half by the Indiana-Ohio state line.
Okay.
It's right on the state line.
College?
North of Richmond, Indiana University, Bloomington.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we've got 3 hosts of IU here.
Right, it's
And
true.
yeah, no, JD was on the show a couple weeks ago, and he didn't realize he was walking into the hornet's nest when
He's
I
got a
didn't. I
Purdue
realized he was a
degree.
Purdue grad, but
yeah, at least it was
Well,
like a graduate.
not everybody
degree.
wants to go to college. So
He was making references to not knowing math, and we were like, well, that's duh. You know, you're a Bouldermaker. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
but anyway, what got you into politics?
born into it. My family, sort of the sport that we follow is politics in my family.
Yeah.
I've had 3 uncles who were mayors. My father was the mayor of my hometown.
Oh, wow.
My grandmother served as a township trustee for years. 2 of my uncles have been township trustees. Being Democratic Party activists and campaigns is what we do.
You kind of had no choice then, really, didn't you? It was just
Well, you know,
inherited.
I'm the youngest of 5 siblings, and I'm the only one who chose politics in any way. My other siblings have
Were
no
they-
interest
were
in
they
politics.
banished? Or
No, no, they do fine. It's good, though, to have people that aren't in politics because those are the family members I consider donors.
The old private sector siblings.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So was everybody in the family a Democrat?
Yes.
All right.
No question.
No.
That's. I was
There's
asked.
no follow-up to that.
I was asked by a reporter once why I was a Democrat, and I said it was because I loved my mother's cooking, and if I wasn't, I wouldn't be invited to dinner. So,
Great
it's
answer.
simple with our family.
Yeah. Good.
So one of the things that we talk about a lot with the show, being three millennials, is just
I'm not. I don't fit.
but is just how.
You're not too far outside the generation.
I'm Generation X.
That's right. Oh man.
We're rivals.
Begrudgingly. I'm
We're all
begrudgingly
rivals
Generation
then.
X. So
Yeah. Were you a big Seattle
No.
music scene fan? No. Okay.
No.
I'm stereotyping.
everybody that's
I'm
Gen-
X
Yeah,
right now,
exactly.
but
I was gonna say,
yeah.
everybody Gen X has to be a Nirvana,
just thought
Nirvana
you-
fan.
That's the right time period.
Is
but
your
I'm an old
undershirt a
metalhead.
Soundgarden
I'm
shirt?
I'm an old
Oh,
metalhead.
okay.
So
Respect.
just had lunch today at a new heavy metal restaurant in Fountain Square.
Heavy
Southside
metal
Indy.
They have it
restaurant.
themed that way.
It's a theme, and their burgers are amazing. And it's just,
Do they have
just
like funky,
high
ironic
volume.
names for all
Yes.
their? Yeah.
I had the Pantera burger today.
Oh man.
And they're
Did
just
it fight
blasting
back?
loud. It was spicy and angry.
Okay.
Still like
That sounds appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
For those of you listening from our other Midwestern states, Fountain Square is a great area of Indianapolis for you to visit if you come to town. Kind of a hipster-ish area. if you can
Young,
describe
hip,
it
fun.
that way.
Apparently, they have heavy metal restaurants now.
Yeah.
there. I
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
aware of that. But yeah, you're right. Great bars. Good. Speaking of bars, we are recording.
That's
live
true.
From
We should
Liberty
take
Street
that opportunity.
on Mass Ave.
Yeah, Liberty Street Tuesday, $4 specials, $4 pints.
You're
And,
not gonna find a better deal than that.
not
Delicious,
Not at all.
delicious.
And
option.
they've got open mic night on Tuesdays. I think sign up is at 7. And
Starts at 8.
Starts at 8. Yeah.
Yeah, free, no cover charge. You'll see the chairman over here coming and playing his acoustic set.
I cover Tiny Tim tunes.
You told
You
me
guys don't
about
even know-
that.
yeah.
No. Remember at your office?
I had to
told
teach
me
you about
that.
Tiny
Yeah.
Tim. Yeah.
Please don't do the voice.
No,
okay.
I'm good.
Wait,
Okay.
Tiny Tim?
You
Am
don't
I
wanna
not?
know.
I know.
See,
You're-
millennials.
I think you're thinking
why
of a
I'm not a
different Tiny
millennial.
Tim.
Not that Tiny Tim?
Not that Tiny
Not
Tim.
the guy with the little crutch?
No,
No.
no,
Oh.
different
Wrong Tiny
Tiny
Tim.
Tim.
Wrong Tiny Tim.
This Tiny Tim, you pulled up a YouTube video, and I've been scarred ever since, to be
Well,
honest. Yeah.
He had a top 40 hit.
He had a hit.
He had a
You're
top
right.
40. He's making more money on the radio than you have.
It's very
Tiptoe
true.
through the tulips. Is that was the one?
Yes.
Whoa,
How
Mark.
about that?
Are you on the computer over there?
Producer
No way,
Mark,
man, I knew that.
Googling
No.
things.
Yeah.
Doing his job.
Wow.
So is that the name of the band? Tiny
person.
Tim?
It's a solo artist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and boy,
Got
he's
by
an
on good
artist.
looks.
Yeah. I'm probably annoying the crap out of somebody right now by not knowing that, but hopefully we have enough listeners to
It
Yeah,
goes
they
with
do.
your generation.
Yeah, but actually, I think higher of you that you don't know it. To be honest, yeah, it's crazy.
But I think I got a little off track with what I was trying to ask. Was
Yeah.
just I think one of the things we're trying to do with the show is get millennials more involved and try to open eyes to and ears to some different news and entertainment things. And so I think one of the things I asked JD when he was here was just any advice on anybody that millennial age group that wants to get involved or thinks that they have a shot at running for something or any advice
Or
you'd have for,
operative staff stuff,
Yeah.
like any advice you'd give to young folks that want to get involved.
Absolutely. The way that I got involved, obviously, it was a family business for me. I'm from a small town, though. I had no connections in Indianapolis in the city. In the way that you get involved, in the way that you accomplish anything in politics, whether you're Democrat or Republican or Libertarian or what else, is by kicking the door in. And I've told people, I've done speeches and discussions with people that are involved in things like in Indiana, we have an organization in the Democratic Party called the Emerging Leaders. And when I've spoken to the emerging leaders, I've told them that politics, no matter what party you're involved in, is dominated by old rich people. And that's a fact of the matter. And the way that you get heard and the way that you get influence is not by sitting in a bar and grousing about the decisions that old rich people make that have nothing to do with your interests. The way that you get things done is by kicking the door in and forcing them to deal with you and being in their face all the time and doing good things and working hard and making a name for yourself most of us aren't going to be able to get on the ledger by making financial contributions. But the way you get on the ledger is by making time contributions, by making an effort contribution, by
Sweat equity.
Absolutely. And it's difficult and it sucks because we're all starting businesses, we're all starting families, we're all doing those things. But everybody was at some point. And a large portion of the people in politics were probably born on second base. The only way you pass them is to outrun them.
Yeah.
And that's the advice I give everybody. I offer internships. What I offer is I don't pay, but I only ask you for 2 days a week. And among those interns, so far, the last 4 staff members that have been hired at the Marion County Democratic Party came through our internship program.
Yeah.
And that's because they showed that they were
cool.
smart, aggressive, and fearless. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be connected. You just have to have the guts to kick down the door.
Yeah.
So you would, in your role as chairman, you welcome that enthusiasm, right?
I try every day to recruit it.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Well, that, for every sort of elected official out there, I'm sure, and like you said, some folks are born on third, and that's just life.
We're
but
Democrats. We're born on second.
So-
Republicans are born on third.
That's true. They occupy third base.
That's right.
Usually. But yeah, if you're serious about it, you got to get your start somewhere, and that's probably making the phone calls, knocking the doors, just kind of doing whatever somebody like yourself expects from somebody, and then if you like it, if you stick with it, ideally it pays off later.
Absolutely. You can't assume that any job is beneath you. And in an example, I'll use the Democratic candidate for mayor in Indianapolis right now is Joe Hogsett. He used to be the Democratic chairman of Indiana. One shift a day, he answered the phones at state party headquarters when he was the chairman so that the receptionist could take a lunch break. So if you called at the right time of day, the state chairman was answering the telephone.
You were talking to Joe.
And it was
Hogsett.
a sign of humility, and not only that, it was a money-saving thing for him because he wasn't paying an extra person to answer phones. But
That sounds like Joe Hogsett.
absolutely,
Yeah.
But if the state chairman and the eventual mayor of Indianapolis is willing to answer the phones at the front desk, then how is it beneath me or you or anybody else?
Yeah. No, makes perfect sense. Yeah.
For lack of a better analogy here, I feel like we're channeling a little bit of Shia LaBeouf.
I don't feel like that, but explain.
I don't feel like I'm
Oh, no,
crazy.
link to that.
The just do it thing?
I'm not
Yeah,
following
the
this
video
even a
where
little.
he's just do it. I
Yep.
think I just feel like there's a lot of my fellow millennial friends who sometimes feel a little lost or like they haven't had good opportunities, and it's like sometimes you got to make those opportunities.
Tough to
Go out there
navigate,
and
maybe sometimes.
throw yourself out
yeah.
there and definitely
Yeah.
take something that you may not know where this is going to go. You may think that it's beneath you, but
got to prove your mettle, right?
Right.
I thought you were referencing the Shia LaBeouf art exhibit where he sat with a bag on his face for like 6 hours. I was
We're gonna have
lost
to-
there as to what the hell you were talking
we're
about.
gonna
It's
have
hard
to
to
link
get
to the
elected
video.
that way.
You could have
Isn't
gone
it?
a lot.
Yeah.
of
It's
different
not
directions
easy.
with that.
Yeah, no. So one of the reasons why you're on the show today, you wanted to talk about this event that the Marion County Democratic Party is putting on. What's this all about at Talbot Street?
Well, there's no question that Indiana has suffered terrible press, and rightfully so, in the last year because of the attack on the LGBT community from the Republican leadership in the legislature, from our out of touch, out of step, out of his damn mind governor, and Mike Pence. And the point that I tried to make on Twitter and in any way that I could communicate with people at that time was that, yeah, these Republican leaders are completely out of step with reality. They're out of step with Indiana. They're out of step with the world. But there are those of us fighting the good fight. There are those of us that are doing the right thing, and that's the Democratic Party. That legislation was unanimously opposed by every Democrat in the legislature. That's not true on the Republican side. That legislation was passed by Republicans with no Democrat support. It was supported by no Democrats here in the city of Indianapolis, and as a matter of fact, we fought torch and pitchfork against it. But I think a lot of the national media and people around the state even don't realize the type of opposition that we waged against huge odds against us.
And you're referring to RFRA?
I'm referring to RFRA in the legislature.
Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
Correct.
And in fact, Indianapolis has its own civil rights ordinance that
Correct.
includes LGBT community.
Which would have been under the original language of RFRA, superseded by the state law.
Right.
And so we've been fighting this fight. We've been right on this issue for years. It's in the Democratic National Platform. It's in the Democratic State Platform. It's the county party in Marion County, Indianapolis, has passed it as a resolution. So my thought was, for all of those who think this isn't a partisan issue, and for all of those who wanted an outlet to sort of shout about their displeasure with what the Republicans have done and their support for what the Democrats and the fight that we are waging, and that we are waging, you know, it needs to be understood. This is not over. This is not the last time that this type of legislation is going to come down the pike from the conservatives. But my thought in talking to my political directors, I said, I want to let our freak flag fly. And I'm staking that ground, and we're going to hold a drag show. And when we started talking about this, a friend of a friend of a friend knew somebody that worked for RuPaul's Drag Race television show, and reached out to someone, and we got a response from one of the queens from that show who said, I want to come to Indiana specifically to do something to let Mike Pence know. Nice. And that was Jujubee, who is well known in the drag community, well known from that show, well known from the all-star version of that show.
Yeah.
So our first national act was Jujubee, who signed on. April Carry-On shortly after that, and then Tammy Brown was the third, and they have done anything they could to accommodate their schedules, their costs, their influence, and everything they could to participate in this to show support for the fight that we're waging here in Marion County. Wow. So we're going to fill the room. 2 separate shows on August 26th. It's a Wednesday night. The Talbot Street Bar is going to open up. It's 100% for our shows. First show at 7:15. The second show at 10 o'clock. Tickets are going fast. There are only 350 seats in the bar. So we're looking for sponsors. We're looking for ticket sales. And whether you are gay, straight, activist, not, it's going to be a hell of a fun time. And I guarantee you will never see another political fundraiser, anything like this anywhere.
Yeah, I've been around politics for a few years now, and I've not seen anything like this. And at first glance, it was like, whoa, county party is actually putting this on. And then I began to think about how it's sort of, you know, it's reacting to what had happened, you know, in this past assembly session, and, you know, Mike Pence's, you know, flubbing of the entire, and how it affected Indiana's reputation nationwide, and it makes perfect sense. It's kind of one of those things where we've all been to the garden variety political fundraiser, right? We have a glass of wine and an appetizer, and you cut a check and you leave. This is fun. When I told my wife about this, she was like, wait a minute. The RuPaul, like the show, and she like cited 3, you know, the performance, and she was just like, oh, we're totally going. Yeah. So, you know, I don't know, it works on all kinds of levels, but it's, for me.
What better political fundraiser to go to than the one where there's no political speeches?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Bring it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely.
And at Talbot Street?
Right.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
Again, for the kids listening that are from outside of Indianapolis area, Talbot Street, great area of town, LGBT friendly, and Talbot Street in particular. Do they have like regular drag shows? I thought they did.
They do.
Yeah.
If you haven't been, come in for this event, because this sounds like it's going to be pretty big time.
Pretty big.
Absolutely. Well, no,
legendary.
You know, it's one thing, like, I'm sure there's maybe there's a performance community here in town that you know, you have some locally known drag queens, nationally known, been on television show. These are like high profile performers within that community. So like, you know, they're super well known. So props to you guys for you know, securing that talent, and I'll be there.
And I just want to point out,
looking forward to it.
We'll link to this on our Twitter, Facebook, everything. But I want to point out that I love the fact that it's library card, $40. You get a little discount for the library card. That's awesome. I don't know why I really like that, but I just like that.
Yeah,
Have
no,
a
that's
have a library card, kids.
so. Again, right, August 26th. Now, when you buy a ticket, is it for both shows, or
One
is
or the
it-
other.
So that you can sell
What'll
700
happen,
tickets.
yeah, the way
is
that it
right?
works. The way that it works is after the first show is over, we'll clear the bar, and then the line will be allowed in. As soon as the bar is clear and we clean up a little bit, reset the bar, then everybody begins to come in for the second show.
Okay.
In between, for those who buy VIP tickets and the library card, you will get to go backstage and meet the performers, have your picture taken with the performers.
Oh, wow.
So in between the shows, we'll have a moment for everybody to come through. If you pay the extra, the VIP price, or if you're one of the sponsors,
Yeah.
you get time with the performers
That's actually
backstage.
very reasonable too, to be honest. $50
Yeah, it's not typical
for VIP.
Not
No,
typical
no,
for
no.
a political event.
Usually you're talking about, $250 or something to
Sure.
get that kind of VIP status. So
Now
Awesome.
that I said that, library card isn't a euphemism for anything, is it?
It is.
Oh, I was sitting there thinking literally a library card.
I wondered. Now I don't know what
I was like,
the
that's a
meaning
good
is.
incentive to get a library card.
But yeah, I didn't know. Yeah,
I'm-
$10 discount for a library.
No, I mean, like, if you brought your library card, I thought you'd get a discount. That's how clueless I am, apparently. So I'm going to
Yeah.
be Googling
Shia
that.
LaBeouf.
Yeah,
I'm
this-
going to
this-
be Googling that
A
one.
lot of this is new to me too, but the
Yeah.
more we plan for this event and the closer we get to the date, the more excited I am because it's going to be. I think I told you guys before we went on the air that we're going to be legends one way or the other, and it's going to be because I think that this is going to be something that people talk about for a long, long time because it is so out of the ordinary in the world of politics, but so typical in the world of the city that we live in.
Gosh, this seems like something that could maybe get picked up by like an MSNBC. With the national profile talent, and then the fact that Indiana was a punching bag for 3
Oh,
months. You'd think maybe there'd be some media opportunities, to go on and talk about it because of how I don't know, outside of the ordinary the event is, but also some recognizable folks, and that it's reaction to the
Well, it
the
also
RFRA
seems
stuff.
it would be interesting to see if there's a lot of crowd of people that don't ordinarily come to political fundraising events, because I feel like
Absolutely.
admittedly I'm not as plugged in as you guys, but when you're kind of a national punching bag for so long and you're the butt of all the late night jokes, it doesn't feel good, and you do whatever you have to do to change, and maybe this is a stepping stone in that direction, or hopefully it is at least.
Oh, yeah.
I think, to that point, it may be a way to bring some folks into the fold, right? Maybe you're on the sidelines until this happened, and you were just so upset about it that it's a way to introduce people to the
Right.
party. And
Well, to bring the conversation back to where we started,
Sure.
there are a lot of people who are outraged by what's happening in Indiana, who are outraged what's happening in other states and other cities around the country to the LGBT community, about the LGBT community that doesn't benefit the LGBT community. And they don't know how to get involved. They don't
Yeah.
have access. They don't feel comfortable participating in politics. They may not identify themselves as Democrats or Republicans. I expect this to be an entree for those people to see that we are not all three-piece suit wearing, cigar chomping, backroom dealing politicians with the image that they
Well, this
have.
would be the way to do it.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a good enough segue that I'll clamp onto as far as a couple articles that I had read in preparation for this week were about getting millennials involved in the political process, and one of the articles I was reading that was at pathos.com, which I'm not sure how much of an established news outlet that is, but at least the citations were there till reputable
Pathos.
agents,
Oh,
reputable,
okay.
yeah.
is this Shia LaBeouf's website?
Maybe,
Okay.
Much less reputable news outlet than this program.
but a tough, exactly.
Well played.
Exactly. But an article just about how it seems like millennials, they're less, they identify less with a particular political party, but they're maybe just as involved. I think we've talked about this before in a lot of other stories. Is that I think millennials get a bad rap in that they seem like they're constantly being compared to Generation X or the baby boomers, and how we're so much worse than them in every category. And So one of the topics they were talking about was, involvement politically, and maybe it's not in the same way that traditionally baby boomers would say, okay, yeah, you're politically involved, because it'll be, most of the time through social media, whether it's putting up a profile pic in support of, LGBT rights or whatever. But where I was going with this, I think, is turning alternative ways of getting, millennials involved into actual political capital for either party, just getting people more engaged. So what I was thinking was, is it going to be a pure fun time at this event, or are you going to try to register voters or get anything?
We will be registering voters. We will be signing up volunteers. We will be, I hope, and we're working it out now, we will be working with the people who are producing the Fire Mike Pence signs to sell those signs and distribute those. We have also invited the candidates who have to get petition signatures to get on the ballot to come and get signatures of registered
Very cool.
voters. So it will be political in that sense, that we're trying to, grow the ranks of political activism.
Yeah, because particularly in one of the articles I was reading about, was just it was I think a local NPR station, that might be incorrect, but WFAE in North Carolina, just
Is that
looking
Shia
at
LaBeouf station?
probably everything
This
today.
is going to be a recurring.
Everything is sourced from Shia LaBeouf today, ladies and gents. But
I came prepared to talk about Joaquin Phoenix. I feel so out of place.
Okay. There's room.
It's a
Way out of
generational
place.
thing.
There's room.
generation,
Yeah, it's a
yeah.
Joaquin.
I could have said River Phoenix. I'm that old. Dang.
But this article was based out of North Carolina, so it's their kind of look at their voter registration rolls, and how, the lack of party ID among millennials, and then just the sheer lack of registration. One of these charts here, which I'll also post on our Facebook, and anybody that wants to look at it, is just among millennials. In particular, it's very striking within racial groups. Whites at 50% registered among millennials. Baby boomers are at 66 among whites in the baby boomer generation. And then it just drops down dramatically for, African Americans, 27% for millennials, 21 for baby boomers. But just getting folks involved, whether, with the new election coming up in the fall. For everybody that doesn't know, we've got the mayoral election this year, so get out there and register and vote, which is part of why I'm bringing this up. But any thoughts there about? I think this kind of event is a perfect.
I think you
it's a
can look
perfect
at
way to do what this article is kind of talking about is you got to go to where they are. You got to find where
I was
these
going to
folks
say you
are
can
to-
look at that like two ways. You can curse millennials, or you can see it as an opportunity. And when you dig deeper than just party ID or party affiliation, most millennials are left of center, right? They're more progressive on issues. Whether it's Social Security or how to spend, religion.
Social issues especially.
So
yeah.
I just saw yesterday where support for organized labor is as high as it's ever been for millennials. So that there are, I think it's just maybe, you're talking about folks who are coming out again. We've talked about this before, but lots of college debt, disenfranchised a bit with the political system. Like you said, a bunch of old folks with money,
Right.
On both sides of the aisle. So events like these, maybe thinking outside the box a bit as to how to relate to and attract a younger audience is great, because they're so low on party ID, they're arguably up for grabs, right? So you're gonna, as Democrats in your position, you're gonna have to find a way to reach out, attract, and retain those young folks, and I think that's a good way to go about it. But in your experience, do you as it relates to younger folks versus boomers, is there a different approach you may have with them versus?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, number one, people want to hear from a peer, and they want to help a peer.
Yeah.
And running candidates for office that look like the crypt keeper don't help us get people elected. However, making the leap from sitting in a bar talking about politics into being a candidate for office is also not an effective or an appropriate way to do it. So one of the things that we focused on in Marion County since I've been chairman is recruiting younger candidates, but from recruiting from within. We, in our in Marion County, Indianapolis, the entire county is the city council because of Unigov. And of the candidates who are non-incumbents, most of our candidates are under the age, most of our newly recruited candidates are under the age of 40, and I think all of our newly recruited candidates are under the age of 50, which is unusual. And that sounds, you know, like compared to millennials, that sounds quite old. But among them, we have millennial candidates. We have some of our top targeted races
at
are
least 2 or
candidates
3.
under the age of 30. And they will be city council people next year. So there will be people who not only are talking to millennials about the issues that they think are important to them, they will be talking with their peers about the issues important to them all, and being able to carry those issues into the office. The other thing is when you talk about registration being down, activity being down, a lot of that is because in the Carolinas and in Indiana, we've been Republican dominated in the legislature. For 10 years now, they've been incrementally making it more difficult to register to vote, more difficult to actually vote, and they've made it more cumbersome for people with busy lives to get to the polls and vote. As a millennial, you're not allowed to vote absentee by mail in Indiana unless you can prove to the election board that for the 12 hours that the polls are open, that you're either indigent and can't leave your home, that you'll be out of your county of residence for the 12 hours that the polls are open due to work, and things like that. You're not allowed to vote absentee by mail just because you want to vote absentee by mail in Indiana. And if you fill out the absentee application and one of those issues, and you say, I'll be out of town, and they decide to challenge your ballot, and they hold a hearing, and they decide that you didn't have a reasonable expectation to be out of your county of residence for the 12 hours, you've technically committed perjury under Indiana statute. And it's ridiculous.
Crazy to me.
It's absolutely ridiculous. But the Republicans say that they're preventing voter fraud by doing this. They said that the photo ID law would stop voter fraud. Since they've instituted photo ID, no instances of in-person voter fraud. Before they instituted photo ID, no instances of voter fraud. The one convicted instance of voter fraud in Indiana in the last 10 years was the Republican Secretary of State who lied about his residence and voted in the wrong place to keep his insurance. So they've made this process.
I knew where that one was going.
They've made this process more difficult on purpose for people who have never been involved in the process before, and they've made it more confusing and more cumbersome. And that's a big part of those numbers going down.
And I think for anybody listening from Indiana, at least, well, or anybody else in the Midwest, you know, the easiest way to get around some of the registration problems, it doesn't solve everything. Obviously, you've got actual voting issues, but registration, I know, you know, the federal form for registration is so much easier. You can use that. So just that's nonpartisan issue right there, folks. Just that's the form that we should use because it's just really easy to fill out and to submit, and everybody has to accept it. So regardless of what state you're in, you should probably use that form. Because I know in Indiana, at least, one of the things I learned about with our form is there's a whole ticket stub and a whole issue about timing and when you file it. The fact that the person that you register is going to have your, you know, name, address, phone number, all your information as the person trying to just get them registered.
Listen,
so,
well, I mean, let's not. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I don't know if the people who view this are bipartisan or not, and if you're Republican and you don't like what I say, call me and we can talk. But the fact is they made
555.
they made a requirement on the Indiana registration form that if I register you to vote, Brent, then I give you a receipt. On that receipt is my name, my home address. The intention of that, no matter what they say, the intention of that was to intimidate young people from going into poor neighborhoods and giving strangers their home address. That's absolutely the intention. If they tell you the intention is anything else, they are a liar, period. They're not a partisan. They're not somebody with a different political idea than me. They're a damn liar, because the whole point of it was to try to keep people from registering poor voters. And it's been effective. And the only way around it is to use the federal form, which doesn't carry the ridiculous requirements that these harsh partisans have tried to unleash on Indiana.
So one thing I mentioned a little bit ago is that we've got a mayoral race coming up this fall. So, like I was saying, I did a little bit of research the last go around. So for voter the turnout, I guess is what I'm looking for, the word. 7.4% from this last primary, which is probably not a good number to use because it's partisan. It's only going to be those hardcore voters, but 24.68% in Marion County in 2014, and then in 2011, the last mayoral, 29%. A little bit better. Maybe people just felt a little bit more engaged in 2011 for that. But I think
I think you look at we lagged behind the entire nation, right, last year in voter turnout. In the general
absolutely.
Election.
I think we were,
and it
we were
wasn't
the
even
worst.
close. I think Mississippi was like
We were the worst.
Yeah, like the second to worst, and we made them look like, great, civil servants, I guess, getting out there and doing their duty. But to your point about the regulations and the hurdles they've created, they've gotten what they wanted, right?
Well,
they've prohibited people from voting, and they've targeted demographics. They've targeted folks who they know are more likely to vote not with them but against them, and it isn't like rocket science, right? You don't have to look very far to figure out why we lag the nation in turnout. It's not because we don't care as much, it's because of laws they've passed to, make it almost difficult and too difficult to go vote, right? That's
Sure.
their.
In the last 10 years since Indiana Republicans have begun their dedication to what they call election and voter reform, our voter turnout, our participation has taken a nosedive. Their reforms to the voter system has actually caused a more narrow system and fewer people to select our elected officials. So I'm not sure exactly what they want to say their reform, the intention of their reform was, but the effect of their reform has been to push people out of a public process.
Yeah, and it's worked very, very, very well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, going along with the kind of our discussion before about RFRA and kind of what caused our state to go through what we went through earlier this year, and what precipitated the Marion County Democratic Party to throw the event that they're throwing on a kind of parallel track. We've got this story out of Carmel this week. So this is another story I was looking at. And last night, I had to briefly, read through this article because everything's been kind of changing pretty quickly. But I know this is outside of Marion County, Indianapolis, but it's part of the statistical area that the feds like to MSA.
Oh, the metro area. Or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
So anyway, the Carmel City Council was considering an ordinance similar, I assume, similar to what Indianapolis has, that would provide protections for our LGBT community. And so last night they had a meeting. It was a packed house. I know JD was there, who's on our show a couple weeks ago, and spoke out. And they decided not to against fast track, and to put it, forward for a couple more meetings. I'm not sure when they're going to get to it, but
They punted, right?
They-
Effectively, they kicked the
we
can
could call
down
it
the
that.
road.
We could definitely
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
So
That's a procedural way of saying we wanted to duck a difficult issue and deal with it later, right? That's
Yeah.
the way I read it.
It's just that it's amazing to me the tone of, because the articles that I had pulled to talk about for this week from a few days ago compared to the one I pulled today, it was, this is going forward full bore. It's going to pass. Let's everybody just get on board. We need to be a welcoming community.
I think the quote that I saw that shocked me was, just because we sponsored the legislation doesn't mean that we support it. That was one of the things that came out last night.
Oh, from one of the
Of
city
the six-person council, there were 5 sponsors, and one of the people who sponsored it said, just because I'm a sponsor doesn't mean I'm voting for it.
Isn't that effectively I was for it before I was
Yeah,
against
it's
it?
kind of that. Yes.
Wait,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Sponsored the bill, but won't support the
Not
bill.
doesn't it didn't. I don't think they said they wouldn't. They just said doesn't necessarily mean that they do.
Will.
Yeah. So as much as this, is kind of interesting to talk about, I think the bigger thing that at least I took from this is that it seems to be a bellwether or the canary in the coal mine, use whatever analogy you want, for what we should expect next legislative session in terms of any civil rights legislation from the State House. And so, I mean, Hamilton County, where Carmel is sitting, one of the most Republican counties in the state. So anything that we can draw from that and what's happened, it seemed like it went. I mean, if anything,
the way they talked about
I was prepared to talk about this in a completely different way until I read this article this morning, and it just went from it looks like everybody's on board with this to completely derailed.
from what I read and the way that they talked about this, potential ordinance was that it was more of a tool for economic development than for, civil rights. And, that the great thing about what Indianapolis has done, and I think a handful of other communities in Indiana, is that, these are necessary protections, but they also, that's why you see Lilly's get involved and Cummins get involved, is that it's about talent, attraction, and retention. And, I think I don't know, you can parse this out a couple ways, but it is an all-Republican council, I think, up there in Carmel, and the mayor is Republican, and I want to look at this objectively if I can and say, all right, it's great that they're going out there and trying to pass this, but then you read the story and you see some of the coverage of it and some of the things that folks were saying. It was a packed house, and it wasn't all in support. I mean, there were a lot of folks there against the ordinance.
Right.
And some of the things that people were saying, I can see why they tabled it, because there was some really fierce opposition there, and it made me, God bless Carmel, but it made me even happier that I live in Indianapolis, versus Hamilton County, because, there was some fierce opposition saying some things that, you'd like to think that maybe folks would leave out of the argument.
Well, I don't know that I would want to leave it out of the article, because I feel like some of the things that people were saying should be said in public, because they shouldn't get away with saying some of the things about it. And this is a nonpartisan thing, I feel like. When you're talking about non-discrimination, I don't care what party you're from.
It's not
somebody that
nonpartisan.
says, particularly in the Indy Star, actually, published, not something that they could get away in a private meeting.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Heck had an opinion piece in the Indy Star where he says that this ordinance in Carmel would not apply to a Christian, that it would basically apply to a Christian daycare center that would want to keep a grown man in lipstick and stilettos employed so that he can confuse the children. Things like that are allowed to be published.
That is acceptable rhetoric in some crowds that some folks run in. Not mine, but
yeah,
it makes sense to some people.
Mr. Peter Heck, sorry, sir, but somebody should point some of these things out. I know it's the Indy Star, and that people read you, but at the same time,
that's my least favorite argument of anything in this whole is how am I going to explain it to my children? Be like, you just do. You're the parent. You explain things to your children. This is not a complicated thing to explain to them. It's just crazy to me that this is still a thing.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Howie has done polling. I think Ball State, other folks have done polling here, and Hoosiers, like across the board, if you don't account for political affiliation or whatever, are close to 60%, in favor of some sort of statewide civil rights legislation protecting LGBT folks. So it's not, I think that,
Man, 60 still feels low to me.
Hey, it's greater than 50.
Yeah.
That's
I feel like that's pretty
substantial for Indiana.
That's
yeah,
statewide.
Yeah.
I think 2 points that are important to make, though, is number one, for all of the people who oppose these pieces of legislation to protect the LGBT community, I always ask them a question: do you believe that lesbians and gay men and transgender folks, do you believe that they are not discriminated against in the workplace and by the government? Do you believe that? Mm-hmm. They have a hard time with a straight face saying that they don't believe that those people are ever discriminated against based on that issue. Mm-hmm. So therefore, that argument loses. They deserve representation and they deserve protection. The other piece is it is absolutely 100% a partisan issue. And it is because the Democratic Party in the National Convention, the Democratic Party in the State Convention, the Democratic Party in Marion County passed planks in the platforms and resolutions specifically supporting legislation to protect the LGBT community unanimously, without argument, and almost without discussion because it's a no-brainer. The Republican National Committee does not put it in their platform, and they have ferocious fights over it, and they always lose. The Republican State Committee tried to put something in their platform this year, had a ferocious fight and lost. And some of the people who are seen in the Republican Party as great champions of this cause didn't even go to the convention to stake their claim and to fight on behalf of the LGBT community because they were afraid that the Republicans who were against LGBT protections would then be against them in running for their office, and there are very powerful donors who are against this. So it absolutely is a partisan issue. This is a bridge that the Democratic Party crossed years and years and years ago without problem, without headache, and we proudly stand on the side of the right. The Republican Party has not made that river crossing yet, and I don't think they're poised to do it anytime soon.
What do you say then to folks who would push back slightly and say, you know, Mayor Brainerd in Carmel, their all Republican city council is at least taking
Then they
up
would have
the
passed it
measure,
last
and
night.
What if they do? What if 2 weeks from now they pass it?
Then
I'm not saying it doesn't make it still a partisan issue, but
Sure.
it's tough to overlook the fact that this is a conservative community, and you know
Sure.
It's a first step, I would say. I mean, the other point
Absolutely.
in those articles is that I think is it Noblesville or Fishers is taking up a similar ordinance. So it'll be interesting to see how they do it.
Yeah.
But you know, I see where the chairman's coming from.
Oh gosh, yeah.
It still doesn't change the fact that statewide the party has a position that the Republicans in the state house have done what they've done the last session, and unless there's some dramatic sea change, you know, the question I posed earlier about whether this is a canary in a coal mine, you know, the canary may be dead because this may be the only instance of where this happens, and you know.
Yeah, I agree with Joel. I mean, if this was a no-brainer on their part, they would have passed it last
Well,
night. You know,
if this isn't a partisan issue, I look forward to my invitation to the Marion County Republican Party's drag show this summer. That should be a good one.
maybe
And on
I
that
think
note-
somebody mentioned. You ought to send off an invite though to the governor, maybe
That was a great suggestion.
maybe the mayor, maybe
I will absolutely
yeah.
do that.
Yeah, see if you can get some of those folks there. I doubt it.
I mean, he doesn't live too far away. I mean, now
It's just down the
he's
street. That's
actually
true.
taking up residence in the governor's mansion. So, well, I've got so many other stories I wanted to get to today, but you know what we talked about has been important issues. I guess the other issue I wanted to bring up was this whole mess with I-65 northbound to Chicago, and if anything I found when I was preparing for the show summed it up, it was actually to our friends in Chicago and Mr. David Rutter from the Chicago Tribune kind of summed up, I think, what the state is going through, and you know what we're experiencing from, you know, outside third parties in what they think about the state with RFRA, and then now with this I-65 issue. For those of you who don't know, I don't know how you wouldn't know that I-65 is closed around the Lafayette area. But you know, a lot of what this gentleman from the Chicago Tribune, other than snarky comments criticizing the state, which I think are well
You
deserved,
get that a lot from their outlet, I think.
but is just, you know, talking about how we have, you know, $2.4 billion, $2.14 billion in reserves, and that the governor says that he'll think about, quotation marks, air quotes there for the iTunes listeners, getting to the, you know, rehab of our roads in 2016 or 2017. That the American Society of Civil Engineers have looked at this and gave Indiana a D+ rating, so one of the worst, obviously, if you went to school. And then just how much it costs Indiana motorists every year, $2.1 billion, or $391 per motorist, to have these crappy roads that we're driving on. So I just wanted to open that up to conversation because I think a lot of people are really frustrated with this. I think this particular writer drove through Tippecanoe County, and his comment was, I had no wish to visit Romney, Indiana, but I was forced to because of an invitation by Mike Pence, or Mike Pence insisted that I visit Romney, Indiana, through the detour that has been outlined for everybody. So,
hey, surplus. You know, that's the mantra. If you look at whether it's roads, you know, whether it's FSSA, this state lacks serious investment on all kinds of fronts because of the need to tout and celebrate and champion a surplus purely out of politics, right? That's it, they think it's more prudent for them as politicians to say we have a surplus than to do the things we need to do, and when that's the case, you're always reactionary. I would love to see if somebody's going to try to do an economic, like a fiscal impact study on what this has done, you know, as far as, you know, transit goes, Chicago and Indianapolis, because, you know, like that $391, you know, per motorist for, you know, for bad roads. People need to know that these, you know, the lack of action from our governor and from our assembly is costing them money. I guess it's politically advantageous to say, yeah, we're frugal, or yeah, we're fiscally, you know, responsible or prudent, but, you know, it's only a matter of time. Think about if that bridge would have gone out while folks were, you know, driving over. It's only a matter of time before this inaction results in something that's a tragedy, to be honest.
Now, I'm not a budget specialist or anything, but wouldn't it be pretty easy to claim surplus if you don't spend any money on like unnecessary
On Hoosiers, on
like,
yeah,
sure.
sure.
I can save all the money in the world if I don't spend anything.
Yeah.
Like, am I overthinking this or?
Yeah.
Bragging about your savings account when you're putting pots under the roof when it rains because you have holes in the roof.
Yeah.
One of the things about this that's, I think, a description of the situation that we're in is, for people who don't know the geography of Indiana or where we're talking about, it's Interstate 65 between Indianapolis and Chicago. Almost right in the center of that stretch of road, a bridge has been taken out of service because suddenly one day it sank 5 inches. And it's not drivable, and they're not really sure how they're going to fix it or if they're going to have to replace it, from what I hear. But the beauty of that is, to me, is that the point where that bridge is located is right almost in Lafayette, Indiana, West Lafayette, Indiana, where Purdue University is located.
Right.
The current president of Purdue University is the former governor of Indiana, Mitch Daniels, who sold the toll road in northern Indiana for a few $1 million and talked about how they were going to be able to upgrade and fix specifically infrastructure and bridges. And now Mitch Daniels cannot get to Indianapolis to do business without taking a 1-hour detour on what should be a 1-hour trip becomes a 2-hour trip because a bridge failed that didn't get the proper maintenance, even though he sold the toll road and then handed out contracts all over the state. I don't think that our infrastructure is any healthier than it was then. Mike Pence is claiming that he has a surplus and the roads and bridges are still failing. And we haven't even begun to talk about what's happening under the streets in the sewers and storm sewers of Indiana, where we're one of the few states where there's a heavy rainfall that in a lot of cities, sewage is still discharged into our waterways. So we're in a bad way with infrastructure in Indiana, and it's been ignored for a long time. But we've been under complete Republican rule, and again, I'm a hard partisan, but this is a partisan matter. Spending money on appropriate government activity is not pork barrel. It's doing your damn job, and they haven't been doing their job, and we're suffering the consequence.
Well, I think that's pretty much the definition of karma for Governor Daniels there. Anyway, thank you, everybody, for listening today. That's all the time we have. Please join us next week on Flyover Live when we have Guijo Gordon, the Director of Communications for the Indy 11. Otherwise, have a great week, everybody. Thanks a lot.
He's rolling.